Hey guys, Matt McQueenie, Mix Minus Podcast. September 2nd, 2017. Can you believe we are nearly in the final quarter of the year 2017? I feel like 2016 just started, and here we are on the somewhat precipice of 2018. Has anybody else looked at like trades that happen in sports and the NBA, and especially I'm thinking of the Cleveland Cavaliers trade with the Boston Celtics? That's somewhat of a blockbuster, you would call it, where Kyrie Irving went to Boston. Isaiah Thomas came to the Cavs with Jay Crowder, his name Ante Zizic or something, some 7-footer from Europe or Croatia or something like that. And then they had the 2018 Nets pick, that first round pick, those Nets picks that just keep burning them. Look at this pick making its way to Cleveland eventually. The Nets can do something about that this year by winning a little more and not giving away such a high pick by losing a lot. But when you see 2018, you go, oh man, that's in forever. And it's not. It's this coming year. Oh my God, I can't believe here we are. It's Labor Day weekend, the kind of unofficial end of summer. Summer obviously ends on September 22nd or 21st. I forget which one, but we never think of it that way. We always think of Labor Day being the end of it. And it's really cool today. Woke up today and went out and it was like 53 degrees, just really, really brisk, and makes you think about fall. And there are parts of me that like fall. I just don't know if I was ready to feel fall right now. I don't know why, but I'm feeling kind of melancholy these days. I'm having one of those periods of time where you have the whole what's the point of it all thing. And I'm not a depressive person in any way. Not saying there's anything wrong with being that way, but I'm sort of eternally optimistic. I always look for the good in things. But I'll tell you what can upend it for me. Not getting sleep, anxiety, stress, which I don't take on very much. I don't put stress out there. I'll break and then have like a moment where I blow it all out, vent it all out. I might yell at my son a little too hard for doing something really dumb, like making the toilet paper roll, use up you turn around and all the toilet paper is out of the toilet roll and just drives you nuts and you flip out. But it's really not about that. It's just the culmination of things going on. But I'm at a period of time and I don't know what it is. Is it being 35 years old? I just did the episode where I talked about the amazing aspect of being 35, but there's something about it where, say you live to 70, 80, I'm only halfway there. So there's a lot of time to go, but you get a little bit of a midlife crisis aspect. It's not midlife, but maybe it's work life. Maybe it's adult life kind of crisis thing where you just reach these periods of time where you really need something different to shake it up. You just need something else. You need that next thing to grasp for that takes your mental energy, takes your mental bandwidth, and gives you something to focus on. I'm not saying marriage doesn't do that or having a child. They obviously do. But it's important to diversify that bandwidth, to focus it on things that are very personal. I always was like that. I always say that I would be single if I didn't meet Melanie because I was okay with being single. It really had to take somebody who blew me away, and I'm no catch, but it had to be that because even though I'm not a catch, when I'm on my own, I'm happy. I'm fine being on my own. I've always been like that. I could, as long as I'm going out to dinner with somebody, as long as I get a little bit of human contact in a day, my alone time's fine. If you go too many days being alone, if you go a whole weekend, then it starts to kind of add up on you, just as being with somebody for too much of your time can add up on you. It's weird the way the human psyche works like that. But I'm just in one of these periods of time where I just feel like I want something else. I need something more. I need something new. I need something novel. I'm coming up on 4 years this month, actually, of podcasting. Podcasting was that novel thing for me. When I started this, when I was 31 years old, I remember taking about a month to just get in the weeds on this thing, on podcasting, to just learn everything I could about it, to find the great setups, to find the great microphones, to find the board you want, to find the kind of setting you want, how you want your show to be. Is it going to be interview? Is it going to be discussion based? For me, it was everything. For me, it was an interview that's 40 minutes or an interview that's 30 minutes or a discussion for 3 hours with friends. I like the idea that it's open to everything. Bring on all comers, talk to anybody. Everybody's got a story. You can learn something from everybody, from anybody. You could pull in lessons from somebody who the world might not care about. Because they have something there. I mean, I don't mean care about. I mean, they're not celebrity, right? And when you think about celebrities, they're really not that interesting either. A lot of times it's the person who is the afterthought, who's got the most to say. And so I've loved doing that. Not to say that the people I've had on are afterthoughts. But 4 years ago, starting this brought everything to me. It just had a singular focus. I was not yet a parent. I was coming up on, I guess I became a parent a year later. If I was 31 and 32. Yeah, I became a parent a year later. So I had a good run of about a year where I had nothing impeding my ability to do this. But I was in on it. And I loved podcasting leading up to it. And that is what made me want to do this. This is what makes everybody want to do this. I actually saw somebody I know, a friend of my wife's, who works at a company that does research for radio and frequently for internet radio and now for podcasting. And it was a survey for people to be a part of a study. And I had been a part of a study with this woman before in this company where she came and interviewed me and interviewed my routine with podcasting. She did videos on YouTube. It was kind of fun. And I made a little money from it, which was nice. About $125, I think. Really nice for someone to come and just talk to you. So she followed me with her video person as I drove to the coffee place I go to, as I'm at home, and how I interact with podcasts. And it was interesting because, as I said, the podcasts, they emanate from my phone. And then I just kind of fling them all around the place. So when I'm in my car, I fling it into my Bluetooth. When I'm in the bathroom, in the shower, I fling it to my Bluetooth speaker. Now everything is Amazon Alexas and Google Home and all that. So you could do all of that. It's funny that the Amazon Echo just turned on in the other side of the room because it heard me call it out. And I actually heard somebody say to me, hey, you got to stop using that name because it's setting them off in my house. But I don't know what else you're supposed to do. You got to that's how you have to go with it. You got to say the words, right? But I remember being in this show, and it was great. I just showed how it interacts with my life. But I was not yet a podcast producer at that time. And so when I took this survey again, years later, it was just recently, actually a couple months ago, one of the questions was, do you have a podcast? And that one question, by saying yes, disqualified me from the study, because I think people love this medium so much. And they just want to do it. They want to be in people's ears. They want what they say to matter, to be out there in the world, to be consumed by the world. They think it matters. You know, they hear people on podcasts and they go, I can do it better. Or that podcast is only getting 80% of the way there. I could go 100% of the way. I could bring it out into the world. And as I've always said, if 50 people are listening, if 100 people are listening, if 1,000 people, I've had some reach 1,500. Think about how crazy that is. Something you're just doing in your basement, right here, on demand, that I'm recording, goes out to the world, and people all around the world are listening to it. Again, it could be 300, 500, 600, 700. They're listening to it. It's crazy to me. I released an episode about the French elections when they were being hacked by what we think was Russia. I think it was confirmed to be Russia. But that episode reached like 1,000 people, and it had a major presence in Europe. People in Europe were listening to my podcast. I can't get over how amazing that is. And when you do this, when you're 4 years in, you have to remember these things, because even things you love can get commonplace. 4 years in, you think, I got nothing more to say. I have nothing more to put out there. I'm talking about the same thing year in and year out. But it's always important. It's always novel. You never know when that next person is going to come across it, and that is the thing that hooks them. So never think what you're saying shouldn't be said, even if it's being said again. Never think what you have to say is not important. And if it isn't, who cares? You're still getting the rewarding aspect of putting something out there. But that's what I always had. And I think I'm running into this issue now. You know, it's a 4-year run. It's like the run of a presidency, right? That's how long I've been doing this. I'm kind of reaching a point where, not in any way do I want to end this, but I need something else. I need something new to sink my teeth into in life. And I keep thinking, man, I love my job. I really do. I don't know if I love the subject matter of it as much as I once did, because tech is really getting a lot less cool these days. If you think about it, tech is being so entwined in our lives that we don't even think about it anymore. It's just a utility out there. So I'm sort of working at a utility now. I'm working at PSE&G. I'm moving numbers. You know what I mean? So it's not as cool as it once was. And I'm going to get into a point with that a little later. But I just want something. I need something new. And the hard part when you're kind of running through your head with this stuff is, do I make the revolutionary change? Do I make the evolutionary change? And what are those things? For me, what is the revolutionary change? Is it applying to work at the Ringer with Bill Simmons? And not saying I would get it, but let's say there's a position I've seen out there for a long time, podcast producer, and I think it's on the sports angle. I go through my head a million times. Do I apply? Do they hear me if I apply? Do they notice my skills? Do they notice that I'd be perfect for this? How do I convey that? You look at people's resumes now and they're basically works of art. They're these digital masterpiece canvases that do things as you read through them. I just got a straight ahead resume. And then you're looking at a podcast producer position and you're saying, is that enough for me? Is that going to fulfill me? It looks like I'm perfect for it, but in the job I do now, podcast producer is one of 15 things I have the ability to do. Now, those 15 things can start to wear on you because you say, I'm carrying too much of this weight. I'm carrying 15 things. On the one hand, you look at it and say, oh, it's keeping me diversified. It's keeping me stimulated. It's keeping me interested. But on the other hand, you say, I'm on the hook for 15 things at all the time, and I have to constantly keep up to date on all those 15 things. And am I being paid commensurate with the level of work I'm doing? Should I be paid more? Am I worth more? If I left, would they give me more? Or am I just overvaluing myself? Because we all do that. We all think we're worth way more. And we are worth a ton. But in the open market, if you're not bringing in a lot of business, if you're not bringing in new money to a company, really your worth is intangible. If you bring in a lot of business, you will get all the money in the world. But not all of us are salesmen. Not all of us are the type of people who can, sell snow to Eskimos. You got to kind of have that ungovernable mindset to sell. You have to know that maybe your ass doesn't have to cash the checks it's writing, right? And that's the difficulty. As somebody who does the work, you get a little nervous and a little cautious about overselling things because you're thinking about, on the one hand, I'm getting money and I'm getting into new business to work with me. On the other hand, I'm saying, I'm going to have to deliver this. I'm going to have to make these things happen that I'm promising. In most companies that are really successful, the people making the promises are different than the people fulfilling the deliverables, because you can't have them do both, because it hamstrings the salesman when they know what goes into creating the sausage. And the actual deliverable person is not, their mind isn't open enough, like flying like a kite, to be able to sell the world. Because when people are being sold things, they want to be blown away. They don't want the technical aspects of, these are the 10 parts of this that'll go into this. It's going to be a long slog. It's going to be hard. They just want to hear it's going to be easy. You're going to love it. You're going to be able to keep your job. You're going to knock it out of the park at your company. That's all they want to hear. That's all they want to hear. Everyone is very self-involved in how they see things, and they just want their thing to succeed. And so those two mindsets don't work as well. And so when you're talking worth, you got to be bringing stuff in to make a lot. It's a delicate thing. But I keep thinking to myself, how do I do that? What do I do? Do I just start applying? Is my, as they call it, is my analysis paralysis actually valid here? Is my not applying to these things also a form of contemplation? Am I not applying to things because I have the right thought? Am I afraid to apply to these things and then start doing interviews and then go down the path where you're offered something and then all of a sudden you say to yourself, this is all I ever wanted. I want to go and live in Los Angeles and work for the Bill Simmons Ringer, be a podcast producer, come up with new ideas, work in this environment of so many talented creators, and it changes your being. I always said when I worked at the Nets, my being was changed a little bit because I was around a large group of people, sports-oriented, achievement-oriented people who raised me up into a little bit of a different person than I naturally am. It opened me up a little more, made me a little more social. It made me a little more silly. And that was a cool thing. And it happened the minute I walked in those doors, the minute I was around those certain points, those certain people. I just became a sillier version of myself. But I was constantly exchanging ideas, coming up with new things, kind of pulling in other people's ideas into my being. I mean, it was a great thing. And I also always felt that I always felt nervous that I would be narked out as a phony, because I'm sitting there with professional athletes. I'm sitting there with coaches. I'm sitting there with the guy who drafted Michael Jordan and Rod Thorne when he was the GM of the Chicago Bulls. And it's hard when you're a 25-year-old kid to not feel like a phony when you're in that case. But there's also something to being naive to it all, to being ignorant to it all, because you're so young that you're not even thinking of the ramifications of it. By the time you're 25, if you're in that room, you think, well, maybe I should be here. So it's all this stuff that happens, and it kind of is always going through our minds at all times. Am I in a good place? Am I happy? Am I content? Would going to the next place make me more happy, more content? Can you be more happy? What does that look like? What are the downsides to that thing you might go to that you're not seeing? The grass always seems better on the other side, and often it's not. Often if you are in the stable place, stable environment, you're doing well. But I just get this feeling now, and I am almost 10 years into working at the place I'm working at now, and I was working there even before I went to the Nets in a different part of the company. So really, I've been at this place for not continuously, but about 12 years. What was that? Almost a score, right? Or that might be 14 days. I don't know what I'm talking about, but I don't feel like I'm being challenged anymore. And I don't know what being challenged looks like. And I also wonder, can I be challenged? I have so much going on at home. I have a child. I have a wife. I'm thinking about having another child. Do I need more in my professional life? And again, what is more? Is it personal satisfaction? What is professional satisfaction if it's professional satisfaction? Jobs are a funny thing like that. They're a way to make money. When you're there, it's almost inertia. When you have a lot going on and you're just overwhelmed with busyness and you have 5 more things on the to-do list to do, and it's only an hour left in the day, all you want to do is get to the period of time where you don't have anything on your plate. But then when you get to the point where nothing's on your plate, your mind starts to play on itself, and then all of a sudden you're thinking, man, I need something to do. And then when you get deconditioned in that period of time, once you start getting things to do, it becomes overwhelming even when it's 1 or 2 things. It's kind of like being detrained from running. If you start running regularly, right? If you do a routine where you're doing 2 to 4 miles each run in the week, and then maybe a long run on the weekend, you have a residual soreness, but each run you feel conditioned to do it. If you then go and take the break, take the time off, even if it's 1 week, even if it's 2 or 3 days, you become deconditioned. Yes, you become rested, you become restful. You feel like you're in a place where you can attack the next run from a point of being very, from a point of being very rested, as I said. But when you start that run, you're kind of, you're winded. You maybe had a lot of food that you ate, the amount of food that you would eat when you were running the 25 to 30 miles a week. You eat that level of food, and then you take a couple days off. You're still eating it. So then when you go back to the run, you're detrained and it feels tough again. It's amazing how quick the body detrains. It's amazing how quick the mind detrains. And I think finding that common ground, finding what is the threshold for which I do enough that fulfills me enough, but is just over the line so I could still stay rested. As humans, we go all or nothing so much of the time. We are all in or we're all out. And that's okay. That's how the mind works. But finding that common ground is hard. And I'm just in a point where I'm chafing at my reality. I need something else. I need the next thing. And putting this to tape puts me in a tough spot, because in 6 months I could listen to this and I still haven't moved. But my mind has moved. That's the dangerous part. When your mind has got its hooks on something, it's very hard to undo it. It's very hard. And even if you do, a lot of times it's just letting it sit there and letting it dissipate. But a lot of times when it dissipates, it gets pushed into the back of your psyche. So it's still there. And it comes out in things like in the middle of the night when you yell, sleep talking, or you have a crazy night thing. Things come out in the wash no matter how you cut it. It's very hard to manage those things. And it's very hard to live the fully optimal you. But I just keep thinking, man, I think I would love to work at an organization like that. Now, you could work, the things you might want to work at, for instance, like me, I might want to work at The Ringer, Bill Simmons' platform. Love everything they do. Love all the subject matter. It's in line with everything I do. And their ethic is exactly the way I think. Every part about it is beautiful. Same thing for Colin Cowherd, his show on FS1, The Herd. Great. That one feels a little more cutthroat and television, and it's a little more argumentative and conflict-oriented, debate. It's more, I'm not a big debate person. I like long-form discussion. I like two people talking, not necessarily arguing. Arguing might be a small part of it. I love a discussion that just keeps the thing moving, like a coffee house or like a bar, the things you would talk there. You're at a bar, you're not just going to start yelling at each other. You're at a barber shop, it might be more. But when you watch a lot of that barbershop stuff, it's kind of kind-hearted. It's just where they're coming from. It's the way they kind of speak. It's the way they feel about the subject matter that they believe in. But I'm more bar than barbershop. I'm more coffee than courtroom. It's like, I'm just not let's get the facts together and let's argue it. Not into that. I just like open-ended discussion. And so that's where I land on Bill Simmons. Now, the hard part is you're 35 years old. You've built a career for 12 years, 14 years on doing something. Maybe you went to college that helped you get into that original career. A lot of people who are teachers, you have to go through these certification programs that take a couple years to even be in the position to teach. So you go towards that, and then 15 years later, you're a little unfulfilled. You want something new. The problem is to pivot, which is a very kind of euphemistic word these days, as all these websites which did great long-form writing are quote-unquote pivoting to video. That scares me too, because when you think about going to a place like Bill Simmons' Ringer, if you could even get in the door, is it viable? He's coming into the final year of that HBO contract that paid him an ungodly amount of money, and for which you can't find anything he's done on their platform anymore. If you look up Any Given Wednesday, the show he created, which, let's be honest, completely failed. And it's just not his milieu. It's not his niche. I never thought it was a good idea. I love what he's doing now. It's the right thing. He wasn't made for that medium. He is not John Oliver. He's not Bill Maher. Those people are professionals at that medium. I don't think those two could do what he does as well on the medium he's great at, which is podcasting, internet stuff, internet video, long-form silly writing. He's a genius at what he does, and it's not that stuff. It's not that old school stuff. So you could think about, wow, I get that. And then what happens if the floor drops out on next year? What if HBO is like, all right, thanks, but no thanks, we're done with this? Is the financial backing there? Is the advertising dollars, or are the advertising dollars that are coming into that still viable enough to support what I think is like a 75-person staff out of Los Angeles that covers, and I think that pays rather well, prevailing wages in the industry. So can it sustain 75 people with you potentially being one of them, with you potentially being one of the most recent brought in? It's always last in, first out a lot of times when you hear that term in business. The most recent people who are hired are the first who are fired, because it's just the way it all falls. And so you worry about that, and I worry. I got this house in Sparta. It's 2 floors with a finished basement. It's 3,500 or 3,200 square feet. I live in what in growing up I would consider a mansion. We're way out of New York. We're about an hour and 20 minutes outside of New York to the west. We're almost at Pennsylvania. We're almost at New York State. We're at kind of the corner of the 3 states up here. And I love it. It's beautiful. I love the town. I love what my family has here. I love the school system. I love I love the proximity to family. I love it. But everything we've built to get here is predicated on my wife having the salary she does as a teacher with the salary I currently have. Yes, do I want to make more? Sure. But what I'm making, it's all predicated on that. And in some ways, we're sort of breaking even still because you move into a thing like this because you figure I'm going to grow into this house. We're going to have 2, maybe 3 kids, maybe 4, although that's a lot. My family was 4. It's tough. Even my family had me who's 35, my brother who's 31, and then there's a 23 and a 21-year-old. So there was a break there. It's hard to have a continuous 3 or 4 kids over a 5 or 7 year period. That's a lot of kids. It doesn't give a lot of time for personal pursuits, which is a tough thing for me in being a parent. That is tough. Love my son, but the amount of time you spend on these little guys, the amount of their day you take, the amount of the bandwidth that they pull from you, it's like streaming, 5 different TVs in your house on the bandwidth you have on your internet connection. It's hard. The stream gets really weak on all the TVs because of the fact that they're all pulling from the same bandwidth. You're not the best version of yourself. I have not been the best version of myself since probably the week before my son was born. My best self is a father, I do believe. I love being a father. I love that kid more than anything. I love my wife. But the best version of myself has been gone since that point. My expectation is it comes back. They get a little older. You get a little of your time back. You're not in this. It's almost like a mission to Mars when you're a young family. Everything is centered on that kid, and he's sort of an animal, right? It's like having a little dog. You never know when they're going to go to the bathroom on something they shouldn't. You always got your paper bag around to pick it up if they go on a lawn. Speaking of a dog, but kid is very similar. Everything is based around their naps. Everything is based around their meals, around their potty, and you're getting up earlier than you ever did because you have to get up to be with them. In the past, you could kind of slide into your day a little bit and be, read in the morning, sip some cups of coffee, then work out, have a nice breakfast. Everything is calm and collected. Now everything is you wake up, you are on, you are ready to go, and you got to be ready to go because that kid is going fast and he is going hard, and you turn your back on him for 1 second and he's doing something bad. It's tough. It is like being a fireman at all times, but there's fires all the time. Again, love it, but the best version of yourself. And look, maybe I'm being naive. Maybe the best version of myself is the one with me as a father. Maybe if the one thing I miss is I'm tired all the time. You're exhausted. You're waking up early. You're with a kid. Your mind is completely stimulated and completely thinking all the time about all the bad things that can happen to the kid while you're with him. So it's on all the time. It's never off. It's never chill. It's never incubating. That is gone. And it makes you really tired. You go to work. You come home. I got a long commute. I'm not complaining about it. I love the long commute because I get a lot of podcast listening done, a lot of audiobooks, a lot of me time. I have no problem with it, but it still drains you. It's all draining you in the background. It's like that phone that you charge at night and then during the day you just let it go. No matter what you did on that phone, it's going to be at 60% or 50% when you're driving home. It's just pulling. There's things that are happening in the background. There's things that are stealing that battery just in its regular kind of version of living. It's just kind of how it all works. You're just tired all the time. And when you're tired, you feel a little punchy. You feel a little irritated. Your mind is not working about larger pursuits. It's not thinking through things you want to do. It's not strategizing. It's not reading. It's not watching. It's sort of a passive vehicle. And you just that's the part you miss. I miss the mind that was excited and stimulated by everything and was focused on creating connections between all of the passions I have. It's gone, but that's okay. Many people become parents and we're all kind of living in that zombiehood for a little while. In many ways, you're kind of a zombie. You're just surviving. You're existing. You're getting that little portion of your day that can be towards those singular pursuits. Maybe me doing singular pursuits all the time was selfish. Maybe it was not the thing the world needed. Maybe being a parent was good. But it gets tough, and that is a difficult thing. But I think to myself, we've set this life up, and now all of a sudden, I want to be the one to upend it. I'm going to let's say I even got the job, right? Let's say I got the job with The Ringer, where I'm a podcast producer. First of all, I'm probably going to make less money than I'm making doing what I am now. And even if I am making the same money, It means I'm going to have to move to Los Angeles in California, which, by the way, I love the idea of. But there's a lot of things on that other end that become very problematic when you go there. You think about the traffic. You think about the fact we're now going to be a single income family because I'm going to have the job and my wife will not have a job when we get there. She's a teacher. Do the certifications even work where she can become one? We're now going to be on our own in California. Sure, we could have maybe her mom move with us, but is that what her mom wants to do? Is that too much of an upending life? Does she want to live in Southern California? Because if my wife got a job, now somebody's going to have to take care of our son. Are we going to be able to afford to live in a town where he's in a good school? Is that the right situation for him? So my personal growth, my personal passion is being handled. It's being fulfilled, but at the expense of my family. And that's the difficult part when you think about these things. I loved it. I lived in Arizona it only ended up being 4 months. It was a great life. I woke up, I worked out. Actually, I woke up, I went with my cousin to get a good breakfast. We went over to the gym, the 24-hour fitness. We worked out. Maybe I would jog home the 3 or 4 miles back from the 24-hour fitness to the house we lived in, the house that had 3 bedrooms, the house that had 2 bathrooms, the house that had a beautiful kitchen, a pool in the backyard with palm trees around it, and I was paying $400 a month. Now, was there a meth lab next door? Possibly. Was there one in the past? Possibly. How are all these houses being sustained? Because it is suburban sprawl. It was like the home we have, but there were hundreds and hundreds of them in all directions. We lived in a place called Paradise Valley. We lived near a mall. And you're thinking to yourself, what is sustaining all these people? I know the cost of living is not that high if we're paying $400 a piece. $400 a piece to live in that place. I live in a home with a pool and palm trees, my own room, cable, all that. I mean, it's great, but what sustains it? What is the economy? I always thought it would be cool to work for the Phoenix Suns or work for a real company out there and make what is a a middle class wage, which there is like being a rich person. You could live in a Paradise Valley, have a beautiful home. Your wife wouldn't have to work and she could stay home with the child. You come home, you're in a beautiful environment. Everyone always talks, by the way, in Arizona, oh, I can't live there. The heat in the summer is so terrible. How about the cold in the winter here? I will give up the 6 months of freezing cold and snow and ice and danger and Game of Thrones North of the Wall for 2 to 3 months of awful heat. Because, by the way, it's the 2 to 3 months that you tend to vacation. And I always said it's 5 hours to the California shore if you want coolness. It's 2 hours to the mountains of Flagstaff if you want some cool mountain air. It's 40-minute flight to Las Vegas. You always can handle that stuff. And you don't go out in the middle of a desert day if you are home. I think it all works out. Now, ecologically, is it a good idea for that many people to be living in a desert and pulling that much water into a place that water doesn't exist? Different discussion. I don't know. But I always think about this. If I'm on my own, do I do that job? Do I go for that job and do I move out there and live there and give my all to it? Because that's the other thing. If you move out there, your family has no friends now. Now, I know we watch all these like Hard Knock shows and All or Nothing, and you see how much NFL players or how much any professional athlete moves and the families have to deal with it. And the family has the built-in camaraderie of the other families who are doing the same thing. And it kind of creates its own, little society in many ways. It's this moving society of the team and the organization and their plus ones and their families and all that. But I think about that. I'm sure a place like the Ringer would have that kind of esprit de corps, but they're all young. I don't know how many of them have kids. But then I think about, I go out there, let's say I get that job. Let's say it is a fair and prevailing wage similar to what I am at now somehow. I'm personally fulfilled, but as I'm at work that day, all I'm thinking about is my family at home. I'm thinking about, oh, did I make a mistake for them? And that ends up wearing on you. Everything is a balance. Everything is a diversified portfolio in life. You have to focus on all of it. You need the calculus to balance out all of the aspects. You can be at cloud 9 in the one, and then in the other aspect, it's completely shot. And if your family life's not good, you're not going home to a supportive atmosphere. You're going home to something that is combative, that is almost warlike, and it's difficult, and it might not be outwardly warlike. It might be passive aggressively warlike, and they're not happy. And then now you're 3,000 miles from home and you made a mistake. And then now how do you pivot? What do you do now? So I often think about that. It's hard. I mean, I see people moving, and initially you say, oh, that's so exciting. It's so great. But then I always keep tabs, and then I see, oh, are they moving back? Or have they now moved on to another place? And then I think to myself, would I have been able to do that pivot and move on and move on? It's a very hard thing to reckon with. And this is what goes on in my mind. This is the battle all day that happens in my head. And I don't even know if it's worthwhile. Maybe what I have now is really good, is perfect. Maybe the human brain is just conditioned to want what it doesn't have, or to want that dark area that is hidden from it, that it thinks is a beautiful thing. You know, you go through the other side of that tunnel to the light. And as Metallica said, I think, what if that light is an oncoming train? It's a very, very hard thing to square. And that's where I am right now. It's hard. It's hard to figure. And a part of me is like, do I try to go into another company with a similar job I have now? And I think, sure, maybe you make more money, but do I love the subject matter I'm doing enough to do it somewhere else and to deal with what might be the concessions that I am afforded where I am now? Where I am now, it's a family-run thing. My family's involved with it, and it's involved with another family who we've been together with for 15 years through the different members of the families. So I have a sort of flexibility where if I need to, I can come in at 11. I could leave 2 hours later if I needed to, if there was an emergency, if there was a problem. I know all jobs can have that, but I could do it and not even care. Like I could do it and it's not a problem. Will I pick up calls when I'm out of the office? Will I still handle all the work I have to and allow those kind of flexibility aspects? Yes, I will do that. And that's something I think you need to do. And I think that ethic would help me in wherever I went. But I keep kind of struggling inside with, do I go for it? Do I go for the new thing? Do I push outside of my comfort zone? Or do I stay in where I am, hope good things happen, hope these itches that need to be scratched get scratched somehow where I am, so I'm moving in place, but I'm still ahead of the competition. I'm still ahead of my the alternate version of the life that I'm seeking. It's hard. I mean, it's tough. Like, you just don't know how to handle those things. And you're making a decision for several people now. And you're upending the life of other people. And what becomes more important? Which master, your own or the master that is your family, which you asked for? Is it the master or the master bedroom? Right? So I don't know. I'm struggling with it. And I go through these things in life where once a year, once every 2 years, sometimes twice a year, where I go through this kind of this calculus in my head. I explore mentally the life that I might be seeking. I mean, I remember, like, I'll really go crazy, right? So I think it was last year. It was around last summer. I like to go to the NBA team jobs board because that was the job I had. That was the only other job I had than this one, was working for an NBA team at the time, the New Jersey Nets. And I know that world. I was doing website work at a time before it became very popular. I was doing it at a time where it was fresh and new, and 25-year-old kids could be running the website of a professional sports organization because those in charge didn't quite know how to hire or who to hire or what was quality. We ended up being a lot of quality, me and my man, Adam Alson. But like a 25 and 27-year-old kid were hired to run a professional sports organization's website. There was no one else who could do it. There was no one else who had any idea how to do it. Everything that emanated on that site was run through a 25 and 27-year-old. It's astounding when you think about it. I mean, it's absolutely crazy. But I will often look at the NBA Team Jobs website just to kind of get the feeling like, oh, what's out there? What are the jobs that are being put out there? Imagining myself. And last year, the big one, there was a podcast, audio producing, digital content producer job for the Memphis Grizzlies. And I never applied for it. And it was around this time last year, actually. I kind of go through these things. And I think buying my Prius, because I just came up on a year of since I bought my newest Prius, I think that ended up satiating some level of need for change. You know, it ended up fulfilling that. I had my new car. I had my new my new better mileage conservation, and I was good, right? But I remember like investigating this, and I never applied, but I was thinking to myself, man, Vince Carter's there. That would be so cool to see Vince again. He would remember me. I would remember him, and it would be like old times. And I was thinking they got Conley. They had Zach Randolph at the time. They had a lot of players. They had a really good coach coming in. They had Chris Holland. What's his name? The guy who used to be the what's his name? Chris. Everyone's going to remember it while I'm doing it here. Memphis Grizzlies, Chris, no, why am I not? John Hollinger. I'm sorry. He did that NBA, I think PER thing for ESPN. He was their analytics guy. My friend Kevin Pelton ended up kind of taking over that beat with a few other people. But I'm like, oh, John Hollinger's there, and this GM is there, and all these people. I was finding these connections, and then I started investigating, like, how does one live in Memphis? And I was getting excited by the fact that it was like a couple-hour ride to go see the University of Alabama. You're hooked to near Alabama. You're near Memphis. You're near Arkansas. You're near all these places where your life could be different. So I'm looking up homes there. I'm looking up how much are they. It was so much cheaper to live in an even bigger home than we live in now. And you just start investigating it to the point where you're ready to pull the trigger. And if you had applied, like, you might not even get a call anyway. But I'm thinking, oh, you could end up actually living here on less money than I even make now, and that's okay. And then I start looking, and it's like, ooh, it might not be the greatest place to raise a kid. Ooh, it might be, the education system might not be great. You might be out of your element. You're living in the South. And look, I'm diversified, open to new experience, but you could make a terrible decision and go there. But then I'm thinking, like my friend Matt Tumbleson did. Matt Tumbleson was the PR coordinator for the New Jersey Nets when I worked there. He was like one of my best friends within the Nets when I was there. And I remember he actually met his wife there as well, Christina, who was working, I think, in the event section of the Nets or whatever. And they ended up meeting there. I remember it was a shock when I found out that they were actually dating. They did such a good job of concealing it. And I got to stay, I think, at their house one night because we used to go out to Hoboken and New York City. And it was such a fun time and a fun environment. Young people coming together. It was a great time. But anyway, he ended up going to Memphis after the Nets, because the only way to move up in a thing like the NBA is to move to other places when openings open up, because of firings in the, like a GM might be fired, and a lot of times the staff that he brought in goes with him, or people might move on to a new job that opens up. So he was trying to make a move, which would then allow him to make another move eventually down the road. He had a friendship that he cultivated with Sam Presti when they were both at the Spurs. Matt was an intern with the Spurs, while Sam Presti, I think, was the assistant GM. And Sam just took a liking to this guy. And you can't not. Matt is a great guy. He is like a phenomenal person. There's some things you read about him where it's like, oh, it's, he locks down on reporters. It's really sketchy. Look, you got to do it. You have to work within the place you are. You have to be a good soldier. If you take a job, you have to follow the ethics of how that organization runs. And a lot of the things where he is now at Oklahoma City, which I'll get to, a lot of their ethics are tied around protecting the players, creating a bubble, creating an insular cocoon that it's us against the world, keep the outside at bay, at arm's length, allow them in at certain times, but otherwise lock it down. Reporters don't like that. Reporters are the ones who end up writing to the world experiences. I'm sure if you got his experience or his ideas or the ideas behind why the organization does things a certain way, you'd have a different thought on it. So he ended up going to Memphis. He and Christina went together. They went to Memphis, and he was like a corporate communications guy. So he went from being in basketball operations, which is what PR is in the NBA teams. They actually work on the basketball side. In the NBA, there's the basketball side, basketball operations, and there's the business side. And a lot of times there's a line drawn between the two sides, and they are a blood-brain barrier. You are not to cross. Business especially is not to cross to basketball. That's the insular cocoon I was talking about. That is an insular cocoon that is evident in almost every team except the Nets, which is something that's an issue. It's an underlying problem that a lot of people don't talk about. Business can run roughshod over basketball operations, use the basketball operations, use the players as they see fit to do things that help the business side. It's a little dangerous. It's kind of like in banks when you have the retail banking and then the traders. And there was the Glass-Steagall Act, which Bill Clinton ended up breaking apart in the late 90s, but there was a Glass-Steagall Act which said the two sides have to be separated. And why is that? It's because when a bank is holding all of this money in customer deposits and consumer deposits, all of the money that you or I put into our banks, our normal banks, our Bank of America's, for me, I use Ally Bank, but Chase, Wells Fargo, all those, that money in many ways is a loan to a bank. It's sitting in the bank's vault. And it's not like you're going to go in tomorrow and take all $10,000 you might have sitting there. So in many ways, the bank can end up keeping that money there and kind of thinking of it as its own. And that was the old thing with banks. It was banks would take in deposits. Banks would give you 3% on your deposits. That's a long lost ago myth. I mean, imagine that. I'm happy with Ally Bank because I end up getting like 1.1, 1.2, which is really good on a savings account. It's quite good to have that. But it used to be the idea 363. A consumer puts their money in, gets 3% back from the bank for doing so, for the act of giving that money. The bank lends out that money at 6% for things like home loans, car loans, most kinds of loans. So you're in at 3, they're giving out at 6, and there's the little margin right there between the 6 and the 3. So they're making money on that money. And then at 3 p.m., they're out on the golf course. The 363 rule was what they used to call. Things have changed immensely. So what happened is, and this is what the Glass-Steagall Act helped to stop, banks would accept the money into their deposit, and because of that money being accepted, here's the beauty of the FDIC. The FDIC insures all consumer deposits up to $125,000. So the bank is taking that money in, and it's sort of free money because a consumer has the backing of the Fed, that the Fed will make sure you're made whole. Like if that bank goes under, you're whole up to $125,000. It's a pretty amazing thing. Now, in the financial crisis in 2007, 2008, the FDIC moved that backstop up to $250,000. I believe it's 50. It's in the 200s. I think it's $250,000. So your money is safe up to $250,000. So these two things together, what they mean is a bank could accept your money, and then when the Glass-Steagall Act was not in place through the 2000s, they could accept your money, and up to the $250,000, it was still $120,000. And who's keeping that much money in a bank anyway? You're not. I mean, we're not going to keep that much. You'd rather just put it into an equity and make something on it. Make some percentage of money because we're not making any percent anymore. But a bank could have that guarantee, take your money, and then know that you're going to be made whole if anything went wrong. And they would do what are called proprietary trading. They would use the money in the retail bank if they were the same bank, right? Because banks have both arms in them. Many did or do. And they would make bets in the market. They would invest in things with that money to try to make much more. They would invest in those collateralized debt obligations, those mortgage-backed securities, all that. And then where it went wrong is when the bets all went wrong, people realized they had been using the retail bank money to fulfill that, knowing that people would be made whole up to $125,000 anyway. So that's part of why the money went up to $250,000, because that was the level of money that the banks were betting the consumer retail money on the investment banking. I mean, it's crazy. So why do I say that? Because in the NBA, it was that level. It was church and state, it was investment arm, and it was retail bank. You can't go across the two. You cannot do it. It's an insular bubble. And so Matt went from basketball operations to Memphis Grizzlies. He went over to the business angle. corporate communications, which is sort of the business and public relations, where you put out stories, you pitch stories that have to do with things that the business is doing, things like even the cheerleaders, but season tickets or things in the community. And he went there to kind of wait out, because in making this initial connection with Stan Presti when they were both at the Spurs, Presti kind of intimated to Matt, when there's an opening, I'm going to go get you, man. I love what you do. I love who you are. I'm going to bring you into the fold. So Sam took over the then Supersonics. I think he was 29 years old. Took over the Supersonics in Seattle. Got Kevin Durant. Did end up getting Russell Westbrook, I believe, a year later. Took over the Supersonics. Then ended up moving to Oklahoma City, and then went and got Matt. So Matt went from New Jersey to Memphis to Oklahoma City. And Matt is now the head of public relations with the Thunder. So you just kind of never know how these things play out. And so I was thinking to myself, I'm just imagining myself in Memphis. I'm thinking about going to all these SEC football games. My mind goes crazy. But this is kind of what you have to do in life. You have to build these quote unquote use cases and what you would do, how you would live. And it in some ways, it does satiate some level of what you're hoping to get out of that experience. Is the ability to live in a new environment. And if your mind can imagine it, if you could sit on your couch, put your feet up while your son's napping, and just kind of germinate this idea and sit there for 20 minutes and imagine it, it sort of happens in some way. It happens in your mind. I mean, when you read a book, it's like going to the place, right? If it's, you could go to the Himalayas through a book, you can imagine it all. You could watch a documentary. And so I sort of imagine it, but I go through these things and I don't know what the right answer is. Do I win because of the opportunities I didn't go for? Do I end up ahead? Do I miss out on some greater version of myself that I just am not aware? I don't know. It's very, very, very hard to figure. And I just don't know what to do sometimes. I don't know what to do. I keep thinking, if I go for that Bill Simmons ringer thing as an example, is that the culmination? Is that the payoff of what I started 4 years ago doing this podcast? Did my personal investment in time, in money, in people who have backed me to do this, and all the people who have come on it, is the culmination becoming a podcast producer at Bill Simmons the Ringer? Is the fact that I built up this expertise, that I built up this skill, both on mic and behind the mic, in storytelling, in narrative, in all the things I bring to where I am today, from being a writer with the Nets, from writing in magazines today, from blogging in my early 20s that then got me that job at the Nets. Do all these things culminate in me working in that other job? Is that payoff needed to make it feel like what I've done here was worthwhile? Or is the having done it the payoff in itself? It's just a hard thing to square a lot of times. And I don't know what the right answer is. So I just keep living. I keep waking up. I keep going and playing with my son. I keep putting him down for his nap. I keep coming into this studio. I keep talking. I keep conversations up with all the people I've met through it. I keep reading. I keep consuming. I keep watching. And whether it leads somewhere, has it led somewhere? I don't know. Isn't that the kind of uncertainty of life? Isn't that the sort of variability of it all? Is that you don't know. We're like, it's crazy when you become an adult and you realize how much is being made up in all realms. Like, government is made up in some ways. We think of a president in full control, and now we've been disabused of that notion. We realize now that a president was just in control from etiquette. They were doing it because that was the way it had always been done. And now Donald Trump has sort of blown it all up, and we're learning that the invisible barriers are invisible for a reason, because you can just step over them. It doesn't matter. You step through them. It's invisible. And we're all making it up. And it's that very idea that we're all making it up in some ways. I mean, yeah, there are lessons you learn. There are, there is stuff you can learn in books. There's assumptions, there's understandings we've had over the thousands of years we've been humans that lead to some truths, but I don't know what they are. But it's that very idea that we're all kind of making it up that makes me more apt to just want to go for it. Because Sometimes people just, they go for it and they take what they want in life. They don't try to hurt people, but they take it by storm. They take it by force. Do you fly to LA and walk in the door and say, I am the best person for this? Talk to me. Do they have you escorted out by security if you do that? Do they think it's the moment like Jerry Maguire left the agency? Who's with me? And one person comes, but that one person was important. Like, what's the right thing in life? You just never know. So you just keep living and you learn and you consume and you try to consume other people's experiences to add into your own, to analogize, to help you figure out what's right for you. It's hard. I've done pretty freaking well, but there's just other aspects I think I want. And I don't know. It's just what I'm struggling with. And struggling is not the right word because I'm doing great. Okay. I sound like Trump. Everything's good. So I will pick it up later. I just went on a rant about life without even talking about anything I wanted to talk about, but it's almost an hour. So I think we should call it there, right? So my friends, I will do another one, and I got more podcasts coming, whether it's the NFL with Tim Castano, whether it's the NCAA football with Matt O'Daniels, whether it's the NBA coming up, whether it's other stuff. I got to start getting back into my old random guests that I would have where you don't have a specific thing you're talking about, but you just talk about people's lives. As I said, the interesting afterthought people in life. They got a lot to say, and I'm going to start getting them on again. Friends, thank you. Happy Saturday. Happy Labor Day weekend. I will talk to you soon.